This is Dateline News and Conversation. I've got a really important and interesting show for you tonight. My guest is Douglas Valentine. I interviewed him several years ago about a book that he wrote, The CIA as Organized Crime. Douglas is with us tonight from his home in Western Massachusetts. Douglas, welcome to the show.
Hi, Regis. Good to see you again.
Likewise. Now, Douglas, what I would like you to do is briefly describe the book that you wrote, The CIA as Organized Crime.
Yeah, Philip Agee, who was a whistleblower who worked for the CIA, he was probably the first whistleblower who worked for the CIA, wrote a book about the CIA and his experiences and about how the CIA conducts it affects the secret policies of the United States government. The United States government has stated policies, okay? Those are the things that you hear from the State Department and politicians. The United States government also has secret policies, where I won't tell you anything about, and nobody knows what they are. And anybody who says they know what they are is out of their mind. They don't. They're secrets, unstated policies, but you can sort of, based on the reporting of people like Phil Agee and myself, who have done some research into this, you can make a reasonable guess as to what those policies, those secret policies are, okay? The secret policies of the United States go against the laws of the United States. The United States stated policy is that we are a country for goodness and for democracy around the world. The secret policies as affected by the CIA contradict those. They support fascists around the world. They get involved with things that are illegal. In fact, everything the CIA does is illegal. And yet the people who are in the CIA, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just the other day said, most of the people in the CIA are good people who are committed to their mission and to the law, which is an absolute lie. That's not true. Most people who are in the CIA have criminal tendencies, and being in the CIA gives them a chance to do criminal things. So it's only natural that in affecting the secret policies of the United States, the CIA would form relationships with the criminal underworld, which is why I call, and that title of that book, The CIA as Organized Crime. The CIA is the organized crime branch of the United States government, and it's its natural ally in affecting the secret policies of the United States, which are anti-democratic, pro-business, pro-fascist, anti-left, pro-war. They work hand in glove with the arms industry, but they also work with the criminal underworld throughout the world. They work with drug traffickers. They work with sex traffickers. They work with burglars, with assassins. They work with anybody who's in the criminal underworld in a foreign country that the CIA can get to do something illegal for them. They will hire and they will work with them. The same thing with businessmen here in the United States. When we started this conversation, you asked, before we started recording, you asked me, was Donald Trump a CIA or a Mossad agent? And I said, well, I have no proof that he was, but that, given his being anti-leftist, a freewheeling capitalist, and having accumulated a fortune through industries like casinos and hotels and golf courses that have traditionally served as vehicles for laundering CIA drug money and other kinds of drug monies that the CIA launders. And given the fact that Donald Trump has pretty much admitted to having relationships with the mafia and established a casino in Atlantic City, which is a mob city, and has oftentimes said things like, the mafia are good people, you just don't want to owe them money. And given that Fox News, the most right-wing news outlet in the United States, has justified Trump's relationship with the mafia by saying, if you want to do business in New York City, you have to do it the mafia. And given the fact that the mafia is totally integrated within the US capitalist economic system, and given all this kind of evidence and the evidence that Trump has gotten loans from Deutsche Bank, which can't be explained, and all sorts of money, $400 million, people have said, have poured into his coffers. And other people have traced it back to the fact that Trump is working with the Russian mafia and that the CIA wants to use the Russian mafia's connections in Russia in order to effect its secret policies in Russia. All these things add up to a pretty good case that, yeah, given the fact that the Russian mafia that Trump allegedly works for is largely the Jewish Israeli branch of the Russian mafia, and given the fact that he has so wildly supported the settler colonial state of Israel against the Islamic world, and the fact that he banned people from 6 Islamic countries from coming into the United States in order to curry favor with Israel, I mean, you can make a pretty good case that, yeah, Donald Trump is an underworld character who deals with the CIA and the Mossad. The fact that he says things which appeal to a lot of people does not distinguish him from any other politician. All politicians, like all governments, have stated policies which are contradicted by their secret policies and what they do under the table. And this makes Donald Trump no different than any other politician who's operating on the American or international scene. They say things that they want you to believe and that they think you'll believe, and then they go around and they do the exact opposite. That's what politics is about. And that's how politics fits into this equation of capitalism, the mafia, secret services, and politics. They all work together, and they pat each other in the back, and they pass money back and forth to each other, with the result that average citizens like you and me and your listeners have no idea what to determine as truth and what isn't truth. And we have to just sort of make the best case guesses that we can as to what's really going on, knowing that at every step of the way, people are trying to deceive us, including and especially Donald Trump, who made the outrageous claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him when it wasn't, and actually incited an insurrection, a mini insurrection in this country, and found 50 million people who would back him in that crazy endeavor. So the fact that people are confused and don't know how to distinguish truth from a lie in this country is the status quo. And it has to do with the fact of this relationship, which I tried to outline in the CIA as organized crime, between the underworld, capitalists, politicians, and the secret services. And this is what I also discussed in my new book, Pisces Moon, The Dark Arts of Empire, how the mechanisms for confusing us and why we are so confused. And anybody who says they aren't confused is talking to their how.
So This is all very fascinating, and I mean, there's not much that the American public really knows about the inner workings of the government and large corporations and organized crime. Now, when I interviewed you a few years ago, there was a section in your book, and I made a standalone video about it.
Yeah.
And that standalone video has become extremely relevant today. And it was 70 years, the CIA in Ukraine. Tell me a little bit about that history of the CIA in Ukraine.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the United States, like Great Britain, supported Adolf Hitler in his adventures against the Soviet Union. Okay, that's a fact. As long as Hitler was trying to invade the Soviet Union, the United States and its industrialists, who represent the major policy-making branch of the United States government, is the United States industry. Okay, and they're the ones who tell the politicians what policies to create. And everybody in the United States and Great Britain's ruling classes was quite happy when Hitler went against the communist Soviet Union, which included Russia. And one of the things that Adolf Hitler did in World War II before he invaded France and started lobbing bombs on Great Britain and got himself involved with a war with the West, was to enlist a lot of sympathetic people in Ukraine into his cause against the Soviet Union, which existed up until, and which the United States contributed to in every way possible. After World War II, the United States secretly hired lots of former Nazis into its secret services. I think probably a lot of your audience is aware. Operation Paperclip. Lots of Nazi scientists were brought to the United States to help develop the atomic bomb and weaponry. I mean, all across the board, the United States had a choice after World War II. Do we support communism or do we support capitalism? And guess what they did? They decided to back the capitalists in Europe who were trying to rebuild after World War II, and they reassembled all the old Nazi networks, intelligent networks against what was then the Soviet Union, which represented communism and the communist movement in the world at the time. And they hired a guy named Reinhard Gehlen. Reinhard Gehlen had been the Nazi army intelligence chief during the war, and he had established intelligence nets, and along with intelligence nets, he had established militias and paramilitary groups in Ukraine and all along the western front of the Soviet Union. And these people from Ukraine were employed by the Nazis against the Soviet Union in World War II, and they were employed by the United States and Great Britain as intelligence agents and as paramilitary forces against the Soviet Union after World War II. And you can read about this stuff in 100 places. And Reinhard Gehlen, who was installed in Germany as the head of their secret service, ran these agent nets for Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA. So along with that, one other case that's interesting is that they brought this Ukrainian guy back to the United States. And like I said, I've had a couple of seizures and my brain's not working at full capacity. Can't remember his name last night, but he set up a publishing business through Harvard University. Harvard University itself was one of the major forces in recruiting people from Ukraine, recycling them into the American intelligence services and pitting against the Soviet Union. Okay, and the CIA brought this guy. God, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. And they created a publishing company for him, and they started sending books to Ukraine, touting capitalism and the American system, and spreading Americanism and paving the way for American businesses to do business in Ukraine, which was the object all divine from the beginning, was to turn Ukraine not just into a force to use against communist Soviet Union, but as a place where American businesses could thrive, which is what I was telling you earlier, is that Philip Agee described the CIA as capitalism's invisible army. I mean, this is what the CIA does. It secretly helps to establish American businesses in foreign countries. And it uses its underworld connections and its fascist connections in those countries in order to do that. All right, the neo-Nazis in Ukraine were very happy to take money from the United States and to help establish businesses there because they had the same goals and intentions. And by 1990, okay, so this whole process moved forward. In 1990, the Soviet Union collapsed and a country called Russia came out of the ashes, and the United States started trying to do the same thing in Russia that it had done in Ukraine. American carpetbaggers, first under George Bush, the first, and then under Bill Clinton, flooded into Russia and started feeding off the carcass of the old Soviet Union. And they established organized criminal gangs in Russia in order to foster the American and to secretly advance American interests in Russia. And so the organized crime, which had been largely suppressed under the Soviet Union, started to flourish in Russia. And this became a vehicle for the United States secretly. As I explained to you, the CIA works everywhere in every country through the criminal underworld, because everything the CIA does is criminal, and it has a natural affinity for criminal organizations in every country. And so the Russia had to really, 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 really fight for many, many years to try to counter American subversion in Russia, while at the same time America was building up the Ukrainian secret services and turning them into an extension of the CIA, just the way they did after the end of World War II with this guy Reinhard Gehlen. And starting in 1990, a CIA officer named Frank Lindsay established himself in Kiev. I don't know if you've heard of Frank Lindsay, but he was one of the CIA's founding fathers. And he had retired from the CIA by 1990 when he went to live in Kiev. And because the Soviet Union had had a strong influence on the Ukraine secret services up until 1990, he started recruiting members of the Ukraine Secret Service who had been aligned with the Soviet Union, sending them back to Harvard University, its School of International Relations. All right? And because, as I was explaining to you, Harvard is the vanguard of recycling fascists into American businessmen and propagandists and media people and stuff like that, especially in Ukraine. And this guy, Frank Lindsay, started sending people who had been with the Soviets and were naturally aligned with the Russians back to Harvard, where they were recycled, and they created And that was the origins of the current Ukraine Secret Service. Now, this is a very underreported, even among so-called left or anti-establishment outlets in the United States, but it's a fact, and you can go read about it in one or two places that haven't been suppressed. But if you weren't aware of it, I'm telling you, that's how the CIA started organizing Ukraine's secret services in 1990, at the same time that it was infiltrating and creating criminal organizations in Russia. It was doing the same thing in Ukraine, as well as establishing business organizations. And the rest is history. The 2014 Maidan coup is the culmination of the 14 years before that.
Wow. Douglas, couple of comments I want to make. I think it's extremely relevant that what's happening today in Ukraine is a very large and influential neo-Nazi element in the government and in the war. The famous Azov battalion is made up of Nazis, neo-Nazis. There are several other battalions that are made up of Nazis. Members of their government outwardly, openly support this Nazi ideology. And most of Western Ukraine is buying into this Nazi ideology of hate Russia for everything. But the other thing you mentioned was that how the CIA worked with Russian underworld. And there are people who believe that there is a Russian mafia. But what I also have read is that the CIA has been using the same tactics to influence businessmen and even politicians and the intelligentsia class to be pro-Western, pro-liberal, pro-capitalist. And I think it's pretty clear to me that on the one hand, you have this group of Western leading capitalists, pro-Western values, and on the other hand, you see patriotic, conservative Russians in the military, in the government, and part of the intellectual class. Now, Putin seems to be caught in the middle of this, and many people believe this. I don't know, but I'm just relating what I've heard. And Putin recently now, since this special military operation or war in Ukraine, has come out and condemned Western liberal values. And I thought, wow, this is huge. Russia doesn't want this influence anymore. And I'm just wondering how this is all going to play out. What are your thoughts on the end game, Douglas, of what is happening in Russia due to this US CIA influence?
That's a big question, Regis. First of all, Ukraine is no more fascist than the United States. I mean, let's get that straight, okay? Fascism is alive and well in the United States of America. There are as many neo-Nazis in America as there are in Ukraine. And not everybody in Ukraine is a neo-Nazi. And not everybody in the United States is a neo-Nazi. But there is a compatibility to capitalism and fascism. I mean, fascism is, the United States has the biggest military in the universe. I'm not just talking about the world, but I'm talking about the galaxy. I mean, America is militarism. It's militarism pure and simple. Its biggest industries, the industries that make most money for it, are supporting the military. And despite the CIA dealing with the Russian underworld, It's the military, the United States fascist military that is driving the United States empire around the world and which is driving the war against Russia. It's not the CIA. Uh, the fascists in America, which is American industry and the military working together to advance their interests. And so the terminology of somehow American liberalism being the problem is crazy. It's not American liberalism that's the problem. It's American industry and militarism that's the problem. Now, you can disguise it and say American liberalism is trying to spread democracy around the world. Therefore, that's the problem. But that's the stated policy. And I've been trying to tell you from the beginning that the stated policy is not the secret policy or the real policy. And they may be saying they're trying to start democracy, install democracy about the world, but that's a big lie. What they're trying to do is steal everything these countries have and claim it for themselves. And that's fascism. And that's what's driving American policy in Ukraine. It's not Ukrainian neo-Nazis, it's American neo-fascism. I mean, and to say it's liberalism is just feeding into the Fox News propaganda bullshit. So listen, it's the United States' advantage to have Ukraine fighting Russia. First of all, it weakens Ukraine and this idiot Zelensky, who's probably got more Swiss bank accounts than Yasser Arafat had. I mean, this guy, is making a fortune for himself, but that's the way the political game is played. And he's leading, and so are the pro-Americans in their country. I mean, I don't know what the polling is in Ukraine and whether people actually support this war. I can't believe it. I don't know what the polling is in Russia and whether Russian people support this war. I don't know, but I do know that it's to the advantage of the United States to have Ukraine and Russia bleeding each other dry. It makes Ukraine easier for American businessmen to come in and buy up property and take over failing businesses. And at the same time, it weakens a strategic enemy, Russia, because now Russia has to spend all its resources on this crazy war in the east of Ukraine. So what Putin's plans and strategies are, I have no idea. I mean, you got to ask him and get him on. And then even if you get him on and you ask him, how the hell do you believe anything that a politician like Putin is going to tell you? The stated policies of the Russian government are as upside down as this and backwards and cover their secret policies too. And no matter how much you think you might know about it, you don't know what their secret policies are because they're secret. I don't know what more to say about it, but the situation is pretty obvious. Politicians lie to you about everything. They say one thing out, their stated policy, and at the same time, they're actually affecting secret policies through their own criminal underworld, their own business organizations, and their own secret services. So you can't believe what they say. And to take it at face value is falling into the trap.
Yeah. It really causes one's head to spin when you go down this rabbit hole, Douglas.
It's not a rabbit hole, man. It's not. There's capitalism in this world and business. And you either support human values, which are that 1% of the wealthy should not own 90% of the wealth. Okay? That's what capitalism is. Humanism, true liberalism, is that everybody has an equal share. So you gotta start. It's not a rabbit hole. It means you gotta have values. I don't know what it means to drive that home, but it's a message that does not get across. If you have values, it's not a rabbit hole. It's obvious what's going on. If you have a value that there should not be racism, that there should not be sexism, that there should not be classism, that there should be equality for everybody, man, woman, black, white, that there should not be a rich elite, then it's not a rabbit hole. Then you can see what's happening. So don't confuse it by saying that it's rabbit hole. It isn't. If people have values, it's very clear what's going on, even if there are secrets.
I misspoke when I said rabbit hole. I guess what I really meant to say is, if people can dare to go enter into this research and discussion about fascism, capitalism, Nazism, and look around what's happening in the world, it's very frightening, I think, for a lot of people. And people are not focused on that, I think. They're being distracted by so many other things.
I'm getting dizzy from vertigo, okay? So let me wrap it up by saying two things. First of all, I'm friends with a former KGB officer, Yuri Tatrov, who was in counterintelligence during the Soviet Union days. He's been retired for a while. We have exchanged law information, research information over the days. Yuri invented a system as a counterintelligence officer for identifying CIA officers in foreign countries just using open sources. Go look it up if you don't know what it means. So I've always been trying to find out who and where CIA officers are. So we had a natural affinity. Me and the Soviet counterintelligence basically have done the same thing, try to find out where CIA officers are and what they're doing. So me and Yuri have some interests in common. But Yuri said to me, the communists were right. I mean, it really is the idea, not Putin, not allowing the capitalists to take over a country, the industrialists, the military to take over a country, but spreading human values is the way to go. Okay, that's the first point, that you will find within Russia and within Ukraine, human beings who understand what I'm saying. And the idea is to reach out to them and to work with them and not to go fomenting conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which is exactly what the fascists in the United States want you to do. The way to approach the thing is to have values. The other thing is to conflate anything Donald Trump says with fact. I mean, we started out this conversation. My book, Pisces Moon, the new one, The Dark Arts of Industry, talks about Donald Trump as the incarnation. All right? That means something big becoming manifest as a human being, incarnate, like Jesus Christ is God incarnate, all right, or Buddha is like the wisdom of the universe incarnate. Well, Donald Trump is fascism incarnate. He's capitalism and corruption incarnate. And he represents, and this is the case I make in Pisces Moon, The Dark Arts of Empire, what a writer named William Burroughs called the backlash and bad karma of empire. All the propaganda that the United States has been spreading about itself, what is known as neoliberalism, okay? All these myths have so confused the American people that they can't tell anymore what's up and down. And when Donald Trump says, I'm going to make America great again, they're stupid enough to believe him. I mean, because nobody up is down. And even though this guy is the representation of irreligious, venal capitalists who will sell out anybody in order to make a buck. They send him their money. And it's not their fault, because just like you and me, they're confused about what's going on. And it takes not any kind of intellectual exercise. It doesn't take listening to Max Blumenthal or Glenn Greenwald or Chris Hedges to figure out what's going on, or NBC or ABC or CBS, or even you and me. What it takes to figure out what's going on is values. You have to have human values. You have to have humanity within yourself. You have to find that humanity. And this is what I urge people to do in Pisces Moon, is just to get in touch with their human nature and to try to get out of their belief systems, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, whatever, and just start treating everybody else as somebody exactly like you. Because ultimately we're all the same. And it's just the big power people that are forcing us into conflicts with each other. And that to me is a strategy. And as well as a tactic for dealing with the insanity that we find ourselves involved with nowadays, is nurture a value system within yourself, which is humane. And that's about it, Regis. I'm really swirling.
Wow. That was terrific. And I've done a couple of shows and interviewed people who talk about transhumanism. And they're saying basically the same thing you are. We have to get in touch with our humanity. Everything that's happening around us is designed to deprive us of what makes us human. And you nailed it. You said it so well. And we're distracted by everything else. Different authors that we like and that we read, or different programs, whatever it is. But nobody is talking about, I shouldn't say nobody, not many are talking about what makes us human that will help us figure out what's happening. Wow, that was great. Now, I want to help promote your book.
Okay, yeah, well, put up a picture of Pisces Moon and a link to it, because I've been banned by the left and the right in the United States, and it's really hard for a guy like me who says the things that I say, not only to find a publisher, but to reach an audience to sell my books. And I'm not like Chris Hedges or Glenn Greenwald or Max Blumenthal or any of these guys who have 5 million followers on Twitter. I don't say the crap that they say, and I don't have a lot of followers and people don't know who I am. So I got to rely on guys like you to try to get my message out. So if you would put up a picture of the cover of my book and a link, I would really appreciate it. Okay, buddy?
I not only am going to put up the cover of your book in the 3 places you've mentioned it now, but I want to let my viewers know, and I hope that people will share this interview widely, because it has been really extraordinary, Douglas. I've read several of your books. I'm going to mention the books that I think I've read. I may not have read all. The first one was The CIA as Organized Crime. That one really upset me. And when I came down to your home in Western Massachusetts from Maine to interview you for 2 days, I stayed with you. We had many conversations. I said to you, Douglas, how come you're still alive? And you laughed and you said, well, they don't really do that anymore. They just discredit me. They will write book reviews that will just trash my work, and that's how they deal with you.
Well, I'm going to change that, okay? Because in the last 18 months, I've had a series of seizures and hospitalizations that no neurologist can explain. But it's exactly like what they call the Havana syndrome. and which I call the Langley syndrome. And it's been established that the CIA can use microwave technology to damage a person's brain. I have no proof of it, but I've been hospitalized 4 times in the last 18 months, and I can barely sit here for 20 minutes or half an hour without having vertigo. And none of the neurologists that I go to can explain why I'm having all these problems. So, yeah, they discredit you, and that's the favorite way of doing it. But who knows? We're entering a whole new phase, man. And there's a lot of desperation in the country and in the security services and in capitalism itself. We're facing a crisis in capitalism as the world's resources are diminished, and these people don't know how to maintain their vast wealth anymore. So anything's possible, dude.
Well, I want to mention a few more of your books. You wrote a book, The Phoenix Program, the U.S. involvement, the CIA involvement in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and how that
Pisces Moon talks a lot about that.
Okay, you wrote another book, fascinating book, The Strength of the Wolf, and I think one that is extremely personal to you is Hotel Palcoban. And you may have some others that I'm not aware of, but I'm going to put pictures of each of those books on top of the screen as we're discussing this. And in the link, in the description, I'll put links to your books on Amazon. I have to encourage everybody who's watching this show, if you're not familiar with Douglas Valentine and the books that I have just mentioned, I would suggest you start, number one, with Pisces Moon, the most recent book that covers a lot of what he's had in other books, but really states it very, very nicely and clearly. I also want to mention that what I've learned about Douglas, he is an incredible researcher. When he was telling me about how he got his information from the CIA as organized crime, he somehow infiltrated the CIA and some of these operatives that were not only involved in Vietnam, but back in the United States. And it really, it's amazing, really. And so there is no more credible person. Well, I don't think.
Yeah, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has hired as a top official in his presidential campaign a woman, I think her first name is Amaryllis Fox, who's his daughter-in-law, married to his son. And she was a CIA operative for 10 years. And now a guy who says that the CIA assassinated his father, his uncle, has hired as one of the top officials in his campaign a CIA officer. And if you think that these people, like his daughter-in-law, lose their CIA connections when they go into civilian life, well, then you live in a fantasy world, I mean, once you're in the CIA, you're always in the CIA. Like, once you're in the mafia, guess what? You're always in the mafia. You know all the mafia secrets. And they make you, you can't leave. That's a contract with the devil. It's the same thing with the CIA. So beware of everything that everybody, the CIA is totally integrated into American society the same way the mafia is, and they're indistinguishable at this capitalist disinformation level.
Let me ask you one final question, Douglas. I so much appreciate the time that you've afforded us. Is Russia and Russian people who believe in traditional values, and that's how they describe it, do you think that they are pushing back and fighting this influence of capitalism and fascism in Russian society?
Well, I think and you would probably know this better than me. I mean, Russia still has a communist party, right?
Yeah. It's very small,
I mean,
but they do.
they have not suppressed communism.
No,
It's the United
no,
States that suppresses communism, not Russia. And there's a lot of guys like I was telling Yuri from the old Soviet Union days who still believe in public ownership of property, not private ownership of property. Having a village common, allowing everybody access. Not just the billionaires, not just Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, but everybody should be able to get out and play golf. I mean, instead of having country clubs that are just for the rich, have country clubs for everybody. And there are people like that in the United States and in Russia and in Ukraine, but it's diminishing every day. And it is a crisis that we're facing in humanity, as our humanity is being stolen from us incrementally every day. I got to go, Regis.
Thank you so much, Douglas. It was an honor and a pleasure to have you back. I wish you good health, Douglas, and hang in there, my friend.
I'm at the end, Regis. Thanks a lot. I'll see you later.